Just seeing that TV advert again brings back so many memories from one of the most short-lived attractions in the history of Alton Towers. Welcome to Theme Park Worldwide and the next video in our Remembering series, where that's right, in this video I'm going to be looking back and sharing my memories from Nemesis Sub-Terra, a dark ride located in Forbidden Valley, an indoor drop tower located underground that opened in March 2012 and then closed in August 2015. It barely lasted 4 years at Alton Towers. It was an investment of £5 million. And in this video, I'm going to look back on it, firstly talk about the ride experience, and then also as well, a little bit about its closure and also some of my favourite parts of Nemesis Sub-Terra. It's an attraction that I really do miss, and I know a lot of people out there really miss it too. Now, first, let's go over a little bit of the backstory about Nemesis Sub-Terra for those of you that maybe didn't get to experience it, or maybe you did at the time but didn't pay loads of attention to the backstory. Of course, the clue to this one is in the name, Nemesis Sub-Terra, all based around the Nemesis creature. Of course, Nemesis, a B&M inverted coaster that opened at Alton Towers in 1994. They decided to come back to the theme and put in a dark ride in Forbidden Valley. And I remember in 2011 we saw the plans go in for this and we all thought, blimey, Alton Towers putting in a new show building for a brand new dark ride, but the building looked pretty small. So at this point we were starting to think exactly what this could be. Then we realised that Alton Towers were actually going to be digging down underground to put in this attraction, and of course we later found out that it was going to be a drop tower. But this was so much more than just a drop tower. It was actually 4 drop towers all together inside a room, and there was 40 of you in there, and then of course you dropped down as part of the experience. But again, it was so much more than just that. There was the pre-shows, and then of course as the attraction developed after its first few months of opening from March 2012, a lot of changes were made to the ride as well, so we'll cover all of that. But yes, the general backstory to this was all about the Phalanx operatives returning to Alton Towers, returning to Nemesis and finding a nest of eggs. So they decided to completely close off the site and built a high security compound, and that's what you were queuing up to enter. You were waiting outside this pretty standard looking building. Wasn't particularly heavily themed on the outside, apart from there was a large vehicle out there that still stands to this day. Along with that, there was a little bit of writing on the side, some pipe works, a few ventilation shafts in the queue line, but it was more about the audio and also the screens that were given the storyline behind this whilst you were queuing up that added to it. So it's more about that than the theming. I'll always take away the audio from this. But yeah, basically as part of this, you were going to go down into this compound and then be taken down to go and see these eggs on this tour where everything was going to be fine and everything was going to be safe. Or was it? That was kind of what they were building up with this. Now, like I say, the ride itself was 4 ABC drop towers. Each drop tower could seat 10 riders, meaning that there was actually 40 people that would go in at a time to experience Nemesis Sub-Terra. So, you know, you've got to think, in terms of 40 people going in at one time, quite a lot to experience the attraction. And as you'll find out when we go through exactly what happened here, you'll see exactly how then people were split off to enjoy parts of this ride experience. Likewise with these videos, maybe you got to experience it. Did you see Nemesis Sub-Terra? Did you ride it? Let me know your thoughts. Do you miss it? Down below in the video comments. I would love to know. So right then, so the experience starts, like I say, you've gone through the queue line, you've got all these ventilation shafts, a little bit of smoke coming out, the audio all building up like you're entering this facility. And of course, you then made it to the bag drop, which was the start of the experience. Now, no bags could be taken into the attraction or down to the central core, if we're going with the storyline. And this is when you first had an encounter with the Phalanx operatives that were wearing this black outfit, fantastic, like military personnel that Alton Towers had created for this ride. All the ride staff on Sub-Terra were part of the theme. It was like the only place at Alton Towers, if you worked there, where you could get away with being a bit rude to the guests and a little bit sort of different than around the rest of the park. I actually worked at the park at this point, not on Nemesis Sub-Terra, but I had friends that worked on there, and I was a bit jealous of how they could be and react with guests who worked on this ride, because that's what it was all about. The staff were fantastic on there. The Phalanx operatives, they really got into the storyline of this ride and really into the experience, and that's what made it even more so than to this day. Like, obviously, look at Wicker Man. You've got the Bjornen over on Wicker Man. Yes, they're all in the outfits and you do kind of get into the experience on occasions, but with Sub-Terra, it was full on. If you worked on that ride, you had to be part of the experience, part of the storyline, and that's what people did so well. After this point, you actually made your way through some fake security scanners and into like a pre-show room. Here there was actually circles on the floor, from what I can remember, like spots that you had to stand on in different groups all the way across, and 40 people would make their way into this room, and then they'd actually start to be briefed on what was going to be happen as part of this mission, this tour that you were going on of this Phalanx facility. And then you looked up towards a couple of TV screens in front of you, and then you started to watch a pre-show video, and this really told the story about what you were going to experience, again about them eggs that they'd found there. You were going to go down to this chamber to go and experience it, you know, and like you've been given this special access. That's what it was all about. At this point, of course, once the video came to an end, the groups would go through a door at either side into 2 lifts. Now, these weren't actually real lifts, but you know, they kind of felt real the way they vibrated in the floor. There were some lighting strips just at the side of the doors that created like the lifts were actually taking you down. It was kind of like the light was seeping in from each of the levels really quick, just chasing lights to make it feel like you were being taken all the way down to the central core to go and see these eggs from Nemesis, what have been discovered. And I must say, I did really like the whole idea of you going into these lifts, you're being taken down. It just added to the extra element of it, because you thought, oh, hang on a minute, we're not just going in to view these on this level, we're being taken down deep underground to go and see this. How will we escape if it all goes wrong? And of course, that was what Alton Towers wanted to do. That's why they actually dug down to build this attraction. But yeah, that really made it for me, going down in the elevators. There were sirens and stuff you could hear in the background. It was like something wasn't quite right, even though nothing had directly gone wrong at this point. But yeah, you'd make your way down. Once everybody was down, you'd actually be inside this cave. So of course, you've seen it on the video itself, where you were going to walk, and now you're standing underground in this cave, even though actually the cave was on ground level. If you looked right in that room, I'll always remember there was a fire exit, some doors just there, you know, but people didn't really notice that too much because you were that like on edge thinking, oh, what's happening? But yeah, this room was actually really well themed. It was just a corridor that led from the fake elevators over to the actual ride system. But you know what? It was really nicely done in there with all the rock work around. You then made your way into the central core itself, and this was of course the main show scene in the ride. And as soon as you walked in there, the things that you noticed was right in the middle there was an egg that hadn't hatched, that was standing in the middle, and there was this sort of sci-fi vibe in there, these big sort of machines hanging up from the ceiling, these big lights sort of protecting it and guarding this Nemesis egg straight there in the middle. All sorts of TV screens on like a truss that went round the top. There was sirens and noises, a lot of like mechanical noises going in the background as you were led in by the Phalanx operatives. Bear in mind, at this point, the Phalanx team were really all about getting you in your seats as quick as possible. A, because of the throughput of the ride, they wanted to get as many people through as they could, because like I say, it was 40 people per time, per dispatch. And also, as part of the story as well, they would shout at you, they would say, come on, let's get moving, let's get seated. But that's what it was all about. It was the experience of Nemesis Sub-Terra that people really liked. But yes, you're inside the chamber, and of course you've got the 4 drop towers that were all located opposite each other in a square, all facing in towards this egg, what was standing there in the middle, and the lights were flashing, and you could tell that something wasn't quite right and something was going to go wrong. But for those people riding it for the first time, I don't think they realised exactly what was going to go wrong at this point, even though things were a bit on edge. You then made your way onto the ride system, like I say, 4 ABC drop towers, 10-seaters, just with a lap bar that actually pulled down over the top of you, a lap bar restraint system. Again, that had some changes made to it throughout its life at Alton Towers as well. And that leads me on to say Nemesis Sub-Terra, the experience, did change. Over the first few months, there was a lot of programming changes. They added a complete new scene at the end, which I'll get onto shortly. But yeah, the whole sort of experience of Nemesis Sub-Terra did change during its time at Alton Towers. So once you were seated, that was it. The experience sort of began, and you've got to bear in mind, you didn't really know, where you were on this drop ride. You could see that, well, you didn't even know you was on a drop ride. That was the beauty of it, unless you'd been on it before or you were an enthusiast. You just made your way in, sat on what looked like a bench with a lap bar, not knowing if you were going to go up or go down. Of course, what we all knew, if you were an enthusiast, was that you were going down because they dug down for this ride. But I'll always remember my first time going on it. It was actually during some staff previews at Alton Towers when I rode it, maybe 2-3 weeks before it opened to the public. There was not really any effects. It was more just testing the ride system. But, we didn't really know exactly when we were going to drop, and that's what made this. You didn't know when you were going to drop. And at this point, at the start of the cycle, you were nowhere near dropping because you then had the experience that began in terms of on the screens with the audio and with the lighting effects as well. So you were basically told that the egg is alive and it's dormant, and there'd be like a heartbeat sound, like a pulse in the background at this point. So you think, oh, hang on a minute, it's alive. Whatever's in this egg, the Nemesis creature, is alive. And then all of a sudden, the lights went out for maybe 3 seconds, maybe not even that. By the time the lights came back on, the egg had hatched. How that worked was actually really clever. Basically, when the lights went off, it was just on like a rotating mechanism that spun round. So the egg, the full egg just went underneath and the hatched egg came up. So that would rotate in the dark. So you didn't see that happen, which was very clever. I'll always remember the ride malfunctioned once in terms of the effects. And we actually saw that. The lights didn't go off and you could just see the egg spinning round, which was quite funny. That was in 2012 when this opened. And then, the lights had come back on and you would just see the hatched egg there. And you think, oh, hang on a minute, what's going to be happening here? You then also get like a water spray. There'd be back prods as well, and it's like, oh, what's happening here? This creature is on the loose, it's come out. And then the lights would go off again and you was in the dark. Like I say, you've got this mist that's been sprayed towards you. Quite a lot of special effects were actually added onto this ride, and I'll come more onto that later on in terms of one of the reasons why I think it's not with us anymore. But lots of effects on Nemesis Sub-Terra. And then that was it. You would actually drop down to go to the rest of the eggs, the rest of this nest, what the Phalanx operatives had uncovered. You drop down. It was actually only at about a 7-meter drop, which not much at all. Anybody that knows these drop towers normally know a lot of them are maybe 40-50 meters tall, but this was only 7. But the drop had quite a lot of force to it. The fact that there was air cannons, there was mist, there was back prodders, you were in the dark, it made it feel like a much bigger experience than what it actually was as you drop down in the central core. And like I say, you made it to the bottom. There was all these different eggs that were out there. You can actually see, here's a construction image from this of when they were actually building all of that down there. But yeah, you've got like all the eggs, the drop towers all around the side. And what was quite different as well is that you would drop at different times and it would never be the same. Because it was 4 ride systems, the operator basically had to press the buttons to drop it individually. So sometimes you might get 2 drop opposite each other. Other times it might be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was always random. It was always a little bit different. And that's what really made it. It just wasn't very predictable. Even for somebody who'd been on it maybe 30, 40 times, like I had, you didn't know still when you were going to drop, because each time it'd be a little bit different. Even though it'd all be within about a 5-second period, you just didn't know who was going to go first. And of course you'd hear the screams of the other people who would drop first. And that was all part of the anticipation of this ride. Following on from that point, once you'd seen all the eggs, disco eggs as I like to call them, because they're all flashing different colours, and it was all a bit weird down there, but it was very well themed down in the bottom of this show building. But then like the backup system kicked in, and then it would lift you back up very slowly, back up to the top, to the loading point, which is where you was. And that's when the evacuation would kick in. So the Phalanx team would run back out, they would lift up your lap bars and they would say, go, you need to go. And from what I remember, I mean, this changed a lot during the first few months, but it ended up that there was a countdown. I think it was 30 seconds for you to get out, and it would be coming out over the audio. The Phalanx team would be telling you, come on, get running. At some point, I thought, blimey, someone's going to trip up at this point, because they were literally shouting at you to get moving out of the room. And then, of course, you'd make your way out of that scene. It's like this evacuation. We need to get you out quick. It's not safe to be here. And then you were sent back into some lifts. Not the same ones that you came down in, some different ones. Again, these were fake lifts. Everybody was made their way in. They split the group up into the two different lifts. The doors closed, all the strobe lights. There was a lot going on in there. There really was. There was smoke, there was the strobes, there was a lot of loud audio, the phalanx shouting. It was intense. It was a pretty intense experience. And that leads me on to say this was a 1.4 attraction, not necessarily because of the drop tower, but because of the actual atmosphere that was created. I mean, due to issues with the drop towers, they actually increased the height restriction a few years ago on those to 1.4, but they only used to be 1.2 on the actual drop towers. The same actually as at the dungeon attractions, they were 1.2. And then they increased that to 1.4 due to safety concerns. But yeah, you know, it's one of them that at this point you were being shouted at, you had the audio, the smoke, it was pretty intense. And then you made your way into that lift, which would start to take you up. Obviously, again, it was a fake lift, so it would pretend to start lifting you up. You'd feel it shaking a little bit, and there was quite a bit of movement in there, not just vibrations, but the actual panel at the bottom could move. And then all of a sudden, you just sort of, you heard like a big crash noise, the lights all went off, and then, oh blimey, you know, this lift, it's all going wrong, it's been attacked, it's been shaken by the Nemesis creature, like a little panel opened up, smoke was pumping in. I couldn't believe it at first, like the smoke pumping into there. I thought, blimey, like how are they getting away with this? All the smoke pumping in, and then yeah, all of a sudden the doors would open, and there'd be a member of the phalanx there, normally covered in blood, who'd been like attacked by the creature, who would be like, get out, follow me this way through the exit shaft. And then you'd make your way through a little strobe maze at the end, a little scare maze, where there was a couple of actors in there to end the experience. So overall, it was a very intense experience. For me, my favourite part had to be that lift on the return, just the atmosphere in there. People were genuinely terrified of lifts as well, because, you know, you might not realise there was going to be lifts inside it. People were pretty terrified, and it was great to go on it and watch other people's reaction. It was one of them rides that's great to just watch other people, what they thought to it, and because you know what's coming, and that's what really made it. But like I say, Nemesis Sub-Terra had a lot of changes back when it first opened in March 2012. Then yeah, it didn't actually have the scare maze at the end. The programming was very different. I mean, like I say, I went on it during the staff previews, and that was even more different than what the public ever saw. I must say, initially, the experience was very bland. I remember when we first went on it and thought, blimey, this is bad. And this is before it opened to the public. Then went on it on the public opening day, and yeah, it had got better, but it still needed work. And Alton Towers were actually working on it on the evenings in between. They didn't want to shut it for the day to work on it because they thought, well, it's our new ride. They had the TV advert going out there. They didn't want to shut it to work on it. So they did it overnight. And the entertainment team turned this ride around and made it something fantastic. The opening reviews from it were pretty terrible. So it was really nice that they managed to turn it around without spending too much more on it. Like I said, they reprogrammed the ride, changed some of the effect sequencing, and also as well, they put in this scare maze at the end, which was only a short little bit, but it made it a bit more exciting. Coming out the lift, it didn't just end like it did initially. For them to do that, the ride did unfortunately close for about 6 days, I think it was, whilst they did the work. So at the time, I think a lot of people were disappointed that Alton Towers, you know, they'd shut their attraction. I'm pretty sure this was in May they did that. So only a couple of months after opening, they shut it and actually did some work. But in that 6 days, that's when they changed the ending. That's when they did a lot of re-sequencing, put new lighting in, changed certain bits, and it made it a much better attraction. The reviews were a lot better, and it was a much more enjoyable ride. People really enjoyed it a lot more than when they first went on it. Now, overall, with Nemesis Sub-Terra, it's an attraction that some people didn't like, but in general, it was pretty well received after them changes were made in May 2012, and it went on to operate through until 2015. Now, of course, the ride did close. 2015 was a tough year for Alton Towers with the accident on the Smiler, of course, that happened. And as always, our thoughts are with everybody that was involved during that. I was working that day at the resort myself, and it was a lot to deal with. But after that, Alton Towers, it just changed. Visitor numbers dropped. And they really needed to decide where they were going to go over the next few years. And it was August 2015 when Nemesis Sub-Terra operated for the last time, and that was the last time that you could experience it as that attraction, and we all thought, well, I'm sure it'll come back, but unfortunately, as of 2021, it hasn't done. It's never made its way back. Now, a lot of the reasons behind it closing, I imagine, are A, because of the accident that happened with the Smiler, that impacted Alton Towers a lot, and they had to make some cutbacks. And Nemesis Sub-Terra was a ride that took a lot of staff to run, a lot of the Phalanx team to run that, because you had the baggage area, you had the onload area to the actual drop tower, the operator, actors at the end. It was a pretty intense attraction for staffing. So I imagine that was one of the reasons why, and that's something why we've not seen it come back as well. Along with that, restrictions changed to do with the actual ride system itself. I know there was some concerns regarding the ride system with those, hence why at the dungeons they upped the height restriction to 1.4. So I think there was a lot of factors went into it, and it's a shame because it was a very heavily themed immersive attraction. It was one of the most immersive rides at Alton Towers, and certainly one of the missed. And it's weird to talk about an attraction that only opened in 2012, thinking it only operated for that short period of time. It really is crazy, and I think a lot of us miss it to this day. But I would love to know your thoughts. Did you enjoy Nemesis Sub-Terra? Did you hate it? Did you ride it when it first opened? Maybe you were there on the opening day and you thought this is terrible, then you went back and loved it. And I think I was one of them people. Did it on the staff previews, thought, it's not great. Then of course, the opening day where it had got better. And then by May of 2012, it was brilliant. It really was. And I miss it very much. What was your favourite element? Like I say, mine had to be that return lift with the smoke and the movement of the floor. It was just brilliant. The overall atmosphere in there. Really, it was fantastic. I just want to talk a little bit about more of the recent history towards this ride. Like I say, pretty much everything was still standing in there. And then Scarefest 2018 came along. They actually started a bit of work on the outside. And we heard that it was going to become a scare attraction that would be Project 42. That ran for Scarefest 2018 and 2019. And that was like a scientific based scare attraction inside all the pre-show rooms, and actually inside the top part of the drop tower as well. Not in the base where the actual catacomb was, but at the top. And the ride system was still in place. I know a lot of people thought the ride system had been removed. To this day, the ride system is actually still in place in that building. They just covered it over with wooden boards and put theming over for the scare maze. But the ride system definitely still in there, which is quite interesting. So who knows? There's still 4 drop towers sat there as of 2021 at Alton Towers. Will something happen with that in the future? It definitely will. I'm not saying it's going to reopen, but utilising that building for something else has got to happen in the future. It cost £5 million when they opened it. They dug out a big hole for it as well, so potentially they could do something with that. Even if they remove the building and just use the hole, to excavate like that isn't cheap. So I do think something will happen. At the moment, part of Project 42 is still set up on the outside. Looks awful. There's just like a big bin bag basically all down the side of tarpaulin. That needs cleaning up and removing in my opinion, but who knows? I would love to see it come back with some changes again and updating it. And I mentioned this in my Future of Alton Towers video last week, so check it out if you've not seen it. But I would actually bring it back. If Nemesis was to close for a refurbishment for a year, like the rumours are at the moment that Nemesis is going to need some overhaul, a bit of retracking, I'd actually reopen Sub-Terra that year as a marketing tool for Nemesis when it came back the year after. That's what I would do, and I'd love to see it happen, and it wouldn't really take that much work to do it. So who knows? Let me know your thoughts on the future and your favourite memories from the ride down below in the video comments. And thank you for joining me for remembering Nemesis Sub-Terra at Alton Towers. That leaves me with one final thing to say. I'm Sean Sandbrook, and get out there and keep on riding. See you in the next video.